Have you ever wondered what's really behind the Russia-Ukraine war? We see the headlines, the heart-wrenching images, but the story is much deeper than a single invasion. To truly understand why this conflict is happening, we need to rewind the clock and look at the complex web of history, politics, and power that has been weaving itself for decades. This isn't just a story about two countries. It's a story about empires, alliances, and the struggle for influence in the 21st century. So grab a seat, because we're about to unpack the geopolitical forces that led us to this moment. Let's start with a fundamental concept: NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Formed in 1949, it was a military alliance of Western countries designed to counter the Soviet Union. The core principle is Article 5: an attack on one member is an attack on all. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, many thought NATO's purpose was over. But that's not what happened. Instead, it began to expand eastward, bringing in former Soviet bloc countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic in 1999, followed by the Baltic states Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in 2004. From Russia's perspective, this expansion was a betrayal. For them, each new member joining NATO felt like a strategic threat closing in. This created a deep sense of insecurity and resentment in Moscow. Now let's shift our focus to Ukraine. But there's also a history of Russian domination and oppression, like the Holodomor, the Great Famine of the 1930s, that many Ukrainians see as a deliberate act of genocide. After gaining independence in 1991, Ukraine found itself in a delicate balancing act. It wanted to be a sovereign, independent nation, but its deep economic and energy dependence on Russia made that difficult. The country itself was divided. The western and central parts of Ukraine leaned more towards Europe, speaking primarily Ukrainian and aspiring to join the European Union and NATO. In contrast, the eastern and southern regions had large Russian-speaking populations with strong cultural and historical ties to Russia. This internal division became a major fault line in Ukrainian politics. For years, Ukrainian leaders tried to navigate this east-west pull, sometimes leaning towards Moscow, other times towards Brussels and Washington. The first major explosion of these tensions was the 2004 Orange Revolution. After a fraudulent presidential election, massive protests forced a rerun, bringing a pro-Western leader to power. This was a clear sign that a large portion of the Ukrainian population wanted to break free from Russian influence. For the Kremlin, this was a disaster. It was a Western-backed color revolution on its doorstep, a playbook they feared could one day be used in Russia itself. The situation escalated dramatically 10 years later, in 2014, with the Euromaidan Revolution. Ukraine's pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, suddenly backed out of a major trade agreement with the European Union, choosing a deal with Russia instead. This sparked massive months-long protests in Kyiv's Independence Square, or Maidan. The protests turned violent, and Yanukovych fled the country. A pro-Western government took power. For Russia, this was the final straw. They saw it as a U.S.-orchestrated coup that had toppled a democratically elected, friendly government. Their response was swift and decisive. Within weeks, Russian forces, the famous Little Green Men, moved into Crimea, a peninsula with a majority ethnic Russian population and home to Russia's vital Black Sea Fleet. After a quick, internationally condemned referendum, Russia annexed Crimea. Simultaneously, a conflict erupted in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, where Russian-backed separatists declared independent republics. This sparked a war that would simmer for the next 8 years, claiming over 14,000 lives long before the full-scale invasion of 2022. So, why did Russia make these moves? From their point of view, it was about protecting their strategic interests and Russian-speaking populations. It was a way of creating a frozen conflict to halt Ukraine's westward drift. This gave Russia enormous leverage. It could threaten to cut off supplies, not just to Ukraine but to all of Europe, during political disputes. And it did several times. This energy weapon was a powerful tool for Moscow. In response, European countries started looking for ways to diversify their energy sources. But at the same time, projects like the Nord Stream 2 pipeline designed to bypass Ukraine and deliver gas directly to Germany were seen by many. The geopolitics of pipelines is a huge part of this story. Let's bring it all together to February 2022. By this point, the situation was at a breaking point. The Minsk agreements, peace deals meant to end the Donbas war, had failed. Ukraine was strengthening its military with Western support and officially had NATO membership as a constitutional goal. From Putin's perspective, the window to act was closing. He likely believed that if he didn't act decisively, Ukraine would eventually become a de facto member of NATO, a fortified anti-Russian state right on its border. He saw a Ukraine that was, in his view, losing its historical Russian identity and being turned into a pawn of the West. In his pre-invasion speeches, Putin laid out his worldview. He denied Ukraine's legitimacy as a state, claiming it was an artificial creation of the Soviet Union. He framed the invasion not as an act of aggression, but as a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, protect Russian speakers from a supposed genocide, and prevent NATO from using the country as a platform to threaten Russia. Of course, for Ukraine and most of the world, this narrative is a false pretext for a brutal war of conquest. They are fighting for their very existence as a sovereign, democratic nation. They are fighting for the right to choose their own destiny, their own alliances, and their own future, a right that is fundamental under international law. So as you can see, the roots of this war are deep and tangled. It's a collision of competing security interests, historical grievances, and national identities. It's about Russia's fear of encirclement by NATO and its desire to restore its sphere of influence. It's about Ukraine's determined struggle for independence and sovereignty. And it's about the broader contest between authoritarianism and democracy in Europe. Understanding this complex background doesn't excuse the aggression, but it helps us comprehend the motivations and the high stakes involved for everyone. It's a tragedy born from decades of mistrust, miscalculation, and missed opportunities for peace. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive. I know it's a lot to take in, but these complex topics are crucial to understand our world. If you found this helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay curious and see you next time.